Hello, it is Science Fiction Friday with me, the author Michael Campling, where we are reading Dial G for Gravity, the first Brent Bolster space detective book. And this is episode something or other, I think 7 possibly. Anyway, we are on chapter 9. I'm going to be making sure this book is reissued very quickly with it's had a new edit and it's got new covers and they look much better than the other ones, which were homemade actually. So these look a bit more pro, so they'll be available soon. First place they're going to be available is at authormichaelcampling.com, which is my store. So yeah, that's the best place to buy stuff, because if an indie author, I don't know if you know this, but if an indie author has a store, they usually deliver better service for a start, because we're committed and we want to serve our readers. And you often get extra features or extra bonuses. Like on my store, I can record a personal thank you video for every person who buys a book or an ebook, which is great. It's really nice. I mean, Amazon isn't going to do that, is it? You know, Jeff Bezos isn't going to record a little video saying, "Oh, thank you for buying this bit of rubbish that you just bought and you probably didn't want." Very cynical of me, perhaps. But anyway, the not really that cynical a person, but you know, being realistic, obviously it's a different scale of operations. This is like indie authors love it because we get to interact with our readers, we get to engage with our readers, we get to give extra value to our readers, which is what we're here for. And incidentally, we can sometimes charge less and still keep more money, because the big retailers all take a cut. Of course they do. That's how they work. Our fees in running our own stores are usually very low. Mine takes very little, the one I'm using. And it's pretty handy. It seems pretty slick, and it works well with BookFunnel, which means that if you buy an ebook from me, away you go. BookFunnel will send you your ebook and back it up for you automatically in a special online library just for you, in case your e-reader goes fizz or the big retailer suddenly decides, Kindle, that it's going to stop supporting your device and it won't work anymore. So, you know, hey ho. Sorry, that's an advert, isn't it? I shall crack on. Dial G for Gravity, read by the author Michael Campling, Chapter 9, Earth. Brent opened his office door and shouldered his way inside, both door and owner emitting juddering groans as they completed their reluctant interaction. Brent clutched his head as he looked around the room, trying to make sense of what should have been familiar surroundings. But the place seemed odd, as if everything in the room had been shifted around. Perhaps someone had turned the place over. An unhappy client, he wondered. But which one? There have been so many. He rubbed his temples, trying to prevent them from throbbing quite so loudly. His head felt as though his brain had been turning somersaults, and his memories were muddied and disjointed. He knew nothing of the last few days, but although his older recollections were a little hazy, they seemed relatively stable. He knew, for instance, that this was his place of work, and he remembered that at one time he'd had plenty of satisfied customers. He'd been good at his job. There'd been smiles and handshakes in this office. People had left with their hearts a little lighter, their eyes moist with tears of gratitude. Clients had sauntered back to their regular lives, pausing only to offer generous gratuities. But not anymore. Not since. What was that? A muffled voice was coming from beyond the side door, a man's voice. The intruder! He's still here! Brent squared his shoulders. Whoever came through that door, they'd get what was coming to them. What the hell did they think they were doing, barging into his office and rifling through his belongings? How dare they? The side door swung open and Brent raised his fists. That's right, buddy. Come and get what's owing to you. But the man who stepped into the room was a full head taller than Brent and built like a brick outhouse, his shoulders almost filling the doorway. The guy had his back to Brent and he was looking down as if intent on carrying something. Brent stared. Once again, he had the unsettling notion that this scene was strangely familiar, but he couldn't make sense of it. Brent kept his fists raised, but his hard expression was starting to slip. And if he was honest, he was in no shape for a fist fight. He wouldn't have laid money on himself in an arm wrestle with an 8th grader. The intruder turned, humming a jaunty melody, and when he saw Brent, his broad, handsome face lit with a movie star grin. "Boss, what are you doing here? It's only 11." He let out a guffaw of hearty laughter. "Hell, I don't think I've ever seen you in the mornings before. I guess there's a first time for everything." Brent lowered his fists, sweat breaking out on his brow. So that was it. That was why the office looked so strange. He wasn't used to the morning sunlight pouring in through the grime-streaked windows. Ugh. He shook his head, the motion doing nothing for the pain swimming behind his eyes. The tall man nodded toward the tray he was carrying. "I just brewed a pot of coffee. Want some?" Brent's mind seized on the notion. A cup of coffee. That was the best idea he'd ever heard in his entire life. A slew of witty one-liners fought for his attention, tumbling over each other like excited puppies, but his mouth was so dry he could barely speak, and he settled for the minimum viable reply. "Yes, coffee. Good." "Sit down," the man said. "I'll fetch a mug." He set the tray down on a desk, but as he made to move away, Brent staggered forward and seized the steaming mug of coffee, lifting it to his lips with shaking hands and gulping half of it down in one go, letting the scalding liquid scorch his throat as it passed. "Or you could just drink mine," the man added. "I guess I'll fix myself another." The man marched from the room, and Brent took stock. "There's something wrong with me," he decided. "Also, there's a strange man in my office." The man seemed to know him, but he couldn't recall the guy's name, no matter how hard he tried. He felt like hell, and he had no idea why that should be. He only knew that, for some reason, he'd felt a strange compulsion to leave his apartment and stagger into the office. He'd woken up with a headache from hell, pulled on some clothes and hit the street, but all the while he'd felt oddly out of control. There was only one logical conclusion. He must have been on a bender, and judging by the tremors tingling his fingers, it must have lasted some considerable time. The man strolled back in bearing a mug, and he made for the desk, scooping up something brown from a plate on the tray. "At least you didn't eat my donut. Guess I should be thankful for small mercies." He took a bite, chewing as he looked Brent up and down. "Seriously, boss, sit down before you fall down. You look like hell." "In a second," Brent said. Who are you, exactly?" The man raised his eyebrows. "Vince, you know that. I work here." "You do?" Vince sighed. "Yes, I'm your assistant. Speaking of which, we need to talk about my salary. When I say talk about, what I mean is you need to give me the money, preferably in cash, today." Brent clicked his fingers. "Now I remember. Vince. Vince Claiborne. Of course." He crossed to his desk and sat down carefully as if frightened the chair might collapse. The room was snapping into sharper focus now, and Brent cast his eyes over it. "What a shithole," he decided. "No wonder I can't face it in the mornings." He turned his gaze on Vince. "Didn't I fire you?" "Not recently." "Okay, good." Brent smiled. "You're fired. Now get the hell out of here." Vince's shoulders slumped. "Here we go again. Same old routine." He sat back in his chair. "Finish your coffee, boss, and I'll get you another. Then we might get something like sense out of you, and you can tell me where you've been for the last 10 days. Brent froze. 10 days? I was on a bender for 10 days? A bender? Vince shook his head slowly, maintaining eye contact with Brent all the while. "Boss, you don't drink. Not for a long time. Not since..." He let his voice trail away, a sudden sadness in his eyes. "Listen, I don't know what you've got going on, but I'm pretty sure you haven't been hitting the bars. I'd have smelt it on you, and Drugs have never been your thing. So whatever the problem is, it must be something different. Like you've been sick or something. Is that it? Brent blinked, and while his adult consciousness played catch-up, he downed the rest of the coffee, feeling the caffeine scurrying into his veins, his heart racing. Tried calling you, but you never picked up, Vince went on. I even stopped by your apartment a couple of times, but no one answered. I figured you were working a case. I thought it was strange you hadn't left a note of the client's name or anything, because that's the one thing you usually remember. But there was nothing on your desk. Nothing I could understand, anyhow. Wait a second, Brent said, waving the empty mug in the air. Did you say something about another cup of coffee? Vince heaved his hefty face. Sorry, laughing at my own material. Vince heaved his hefty frame from his chair and crossed to Brent's desk, where he stood, towering over his employer, his arms folded. Just once, a please would be nice. Just get the damned coffee, Brent replied. This isn't a goddamn finishing school, for fuck's sake. Should have warned you about the profanity. And he's back. Vince plucked the empty mug from Brent's fingers and stalked from the room. Do you know, it's funny, I can't remember if I... Anyway, sorry. Interrupting myself. He's right, Brent decided. I am starting to feel more like myself. He let out a grunt. It was just a shame that he was obviously such an asshole. He cracked his knuckles and studied the contents of his desk. It looked as though someone, probably Vince, had tried to assert some kind of order on the stacks of paper. One pile consisted entirely of unpaid bills and final demands. Another was made up of menus, mainly for Mexican food. But the third looked more interesting. The papers were crumpled and curling at the corners as if they'd been well thumbed, and each sheet held news stories printed out from online sources. Someone had spent hours poring over the stories, highlighting sentences in various bright colours, scribbling notes in the margins, circling key words. I must have done this, Brent murmured. I must be a pretty good investigator, very thorough. Here you go. Vince marched back in and put the mug down on the desk. Thanks, Brent said absently. He looked up. So this is what I was working on? Something to do with the glow bombs? Vince's face fell. Those are mine. Something I've been putting together. He snatched up the pile of papers. I was using your desk. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave my stuff there. Oh, Brent took a sip of coffee. Right. So what was I doing? I mean, I've been gone for 10 days. I must have been doing something. No idea. It's not like you let me in on every little thing you do. Vince returned to his own desk and stashed the papers in a drawer. You know, I could do a lot more to help around here if you gave me the chance. I'm working on getting my license, but they'll never let me into the AGI if I don't have some kind of experience. Brent sat bolt upright, his head startlingly clear. The AGI, that's it. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out his wallet, opening it with trembling fingers. His AGI card was there, and he held it close, studying the tiny rows of neat lettering arranged across its surface. The card's chip was linked to the net via an encrypted channel, and its details could be updated automatically. His membership had lapsed, he was sure of that, but now it had been renewed and extended for a full 10 years. And more than that, his membership status had changed. I got an upgrade, he whispered. Platinum. I'm a goddamn platinum member of the AGI. Vince was out of his chair. What? Brent showed him the card. See for yourself. Holy hell! Whatever you've been doing, it must have been pretty damned important. They don't just give those things out for nothing. Brent rubbed his chin, his nails catching on his thick stubble. Either that, or somebody wants something from me. Somebody wants me on a leash, and this is the way to get me there. Who? There aren't many people with that kind of clout, not in this town. Not anymore. Hell, there aren't many people on the planet who can pull those strings. Exactly. Brent said, jabbing his finger at a piece of paper on his desk. And that's what makes this item here very important. Vince's brow furrowed. That flyer? How is that significant? Because it tells me that the lunchtime special is half price down at Martha's, and that in turn leads me to the highly relevant fact that I'm incredibly hungry. He stood quickly, almost toppling his chair. Now, if you were a platinum-level investigator like me, you'd realize that I can't possibly solve a complex case when I'm half-starved. So I'm heading out for lunch, and I may be some time. Shall I come with you? Maybe we could even figure out a few leads over lunch. Brent eyed him suspiciously. That depends. Do you have money? Vince nodded enthusiastically. Plenty. Then you're coming. Also, as an important step in your learning process, you'll be picking up the tab. He tapped the side of his nose. It's how these things work. The central plank of the investigator's code is this: never pay for your own lunch. Have you got that? Maybe you should write it down. Believe me, Vince said, I learned that lesson a long time ago. Good. Well done. There's hope for you yet. Never let the details slip. Grab hold of every tiny detail and hold it tight. You never know when something might turn out to be important. Right, lead the way. They made for the door, but Brent suddenly doubled back and grabbed the flyer from his desk. Almost forgot. I'm not entirely sure where Martha's actually is. The address is right here. He took the flyer into his pocket, and this time he made it out the door without incident. And although I haven't made it to the end of the chapter, it seems to be quite a long one. And it is a little break for them to get to the diner. And I found that was quite fun. Yes, quite a few more pages. So I'm going to leave you there because that's about how much reading I can do without lapsing into terrible errors every 5 minutes and losing my voice. So I hope you enjoyed it. Nostalgia for Gravity, a Brent Bolster story. Lots of fun if you're into sci-fi and you don't mind a bit of spoof and a bit of parody. And it does have like a detective type story. There's an adventure type story there in the background. But it's kind of all about the fun and the journey and the characters on the way. No, that's an old cover. There have been several. And I'll make sure that the new one is available on my store, and I'll try and update it across all the other stores. Actually, thinking about it, the new edit and the new cover is up on most retailers now, as of today. So you should be able to find it out there. So Smashwords, Kobo, Nook. I think the one on Amazon is up to date as well. I'm not sure if it's actually on my store because I've just redone my store and I'm in the process of putting things back there. So I'll leave it there. I hope you are enjoying these wherever you get your podcasts. It's great to have subscribers, likes, comments, shares. All that stuff is great. Really helps to get the word out there because at the moment, there are few listeners, but it'd be great to have more. You've got the video on YouTube, you've got the podcast on YouTube, the Spotify. You should be able to find it on things like Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. Yeah, and a good place to find all the different readings, because there are 4 every week, all being well, if I can manage it, at authormichaelcampling.substack.com. And you don't need a Substack account. You can just find that and sign up to it. If you subscribe to my Substack, you get one email a week. That's all. And it says in there the links to that week's content, which includes the readings and it includes any nice photos I've shared and so on. But of course, you can choose which links you click on from your email, so you don't have to go plowing through everything. You can choose what you want. That's the idea. Give people extra value, give them choice, give them control. Have a lovely weekend, whatever you're doing. Lots of reading, I hope. Chill out, relax with a cup of coffee like Brent Bolster. Try not to drink somebody else's. And I like these little, just reading this again, because I wrote this years ago. It's full of these little twists and things where he says, you must always have every detail, and then he almost walks out without the flyer. I like that sort of thing. That's kind of my sense of humour. So I think entertain myself, if nothing else. All right, happy reading. Great weekend to you all. Take care and bye for now. See you next week.